Hi Nat5s, we are looking at the term niche in the Life on Earth unit. Okay, so this is a very, very specific term that you have to be able to talk about quite knowledgeably. So the term niche just means the role that an organism plays within the ecosystem. Now that sounds like a nice catch-all, and that's the definition you need to know, but you also have to be able to talk about it in terms of exactly what the interactions would be. And the interactions we can split into two main groups. So we can say how it interacts with biotics and how it interacts with abiotics. So these are hopefully ones that you'll be able to get really quick examples of. So biotics would be things like what's it feed on? So is it a primary consumer, a secondary consumer? Is it something which feeds on plants, animals? Because what it feeds on will have an impact on the thing it's feeding on, obviously. Also, what feeds on it? So is it a prey animal? Is it something which is providing a food source for something else? It could be a parasite, so it would then be harming the host that it's in, or it also could have, well, it will have, everything has parasites, we'd be living on it or in it, so that would also be biotic. And then we've got our abiotics. So is the way that it behaves, the role that it's playing, does it change the light, the moisture? And then you've got tolerance curves. So tolerance curves showing that at the far end of either kind of extreme of a factor, things are not going to survive. But there will be a section in their optimal place where they're very happy and they've got good survival, and then you've got minimal tolerances on either side. Both of these put together, I've kind of put in, I know it's kind of, I hope it's clear, it's purple, the resources it will compete for. So that might be biotic or it might be abiotic. So it's everything about how it interacts. So things that could impact on niche. If you just think of any habitat and an example from it, animal, plant, anything, then you can come up with things that might impact on it. So for example, if you go for a rabbit in the countryside, so it would be things like, what resources does that need? So obviously it needs food. It would also need space. It will need spaces for it to burrow, things like that. What does it feed on? If it's a plant, then what does it need to make that food? So if you've gone with a plant, you said like bracken or something like that, well, okay, what nutrition does it need from the soil? How does it get its water, carbon dioxide, everything? And then what feeds on it? So if we're back to the rabbit, maybe foxes or things. And then what conditions could it survive in? This we're going to look at in a little bit more detail in Kyria 2e. Do you remember our Hippo Factors? These are the things which are impacting on biodiversity. So this would be habitat change, invasive species, what I'm going to look at, population, human, pollution, and overharvesting. So in I, the invasive species can overtake a niche that was quite happily working for the species that was there, and that can have quite a big impact on the ecosystem. So here's our best example that we use quite commonly, the red squirrel and the grey squirrel. So the red is our native species and the grey is an invasive species, and the grey is just so much tougher than the red in terms of what it can manage. It can eat foods at a point where the red can't. It's more competitive for nesting sites, things like that. So here's your 1998 picture with our red squirrel, the grey squirrel, and the orange is where both of them are. And here we have our 2010 picture. So you can see quite clearly that the red is getting squeezed out. In particular, you can see it in here where we've got, these are both areas now, whereas before, you know, these were very clearly reds. And in this area here where we had a little patch of just grey, and we've got all grey. So there's a few points where they've managed to reintroduce and maintain, but it's struggling with it. And that's our stuff on niche.